Hey guys, Pastor Tanner here, streaming from my office here at the church. Just gonna double check sound real quick. I haven't streamed from here for a while, so just want to double check everything, make sure everything's coming through nice and clear. So pardon me while I check that. It feels really good, guys. Feels really good. I got the music coming through, but it's not too loud. So I'm gonna roll with that. So here we've got Mark chapter 9, verses 30 to 37. That's what I'm working on for tonight. In this passage, kind of three things happen. This feels kind of typical for Mark. We've got Jesus clarifying his death and resurrection. We've got all the disciples arguing about which one of them's the greatest. And then we've got Jesus bringing the child before them. And essentially saying that if you welcome a little child, you welcome him. So the challenge is, how do all these things relate to each other? Because they feel like three somewhat isolated or disconnected ideas. So that's what I'm trying to work through here. How do the three of these things relate to each other? There's got to be a cross-reference of what I saw last week. Because they were arguing amongst themselves. What does it mean to rise from the dead? Right here. They kept them out of themselves, discussing what rising from the dead meant. So he's already told them this. Mark 9:10. But they don't get it, which is classic for the disciples to not get it. Yeah. So I think that's a good one to reference. So how do we go from death and resurrection to who's the greatest to little children? I can see the move from the greatest to the little children because those seem like opposites to most people. But I don't know how he gets from resurrection to that, death and resurrection to that topic. They left that place and passed through Galilee. He was teaching his disciples, Son of Man's going to be delivered in the hands of men. They will kill him. After 3 days, he will rise. But they did not understand what he meant, and they were afraid to ask him about it. Verse 33, they came to Capernaum. When he was in the house, he asked them, "What are you arguing about on the road?" But they kept quiet. They'd been arguing about who was the greatest. They know it's wrong. Otherwise, they wouldn't keep quiet. Right. So they recognize that's not good. So that makes sense. And then sitting down, he calls them together. So we can't forget about verse 35. Anyone who wants to be the first must be very last, servant of all. I think that's key. That's where 36 and 37 come in. Took a little child. He said to them, whoever welcomes one of these little children in my name welcomes me. Whoever welcomes me does not welcome me, but the one who sent me. So this one here is related to these two. First must be very last, servant of all. And then the child is an example of being last, servant of all. So that's child, welcoming a child. Because to them that wouldn't be something that the greatest would do. So that's really the heart of this question. Who is the greatest? So we're looking at something like greatness in the kingdom of God. Maybe kingdom of God's not right. Maybe the gospel? Greatness in light of the gospel? Greatness in light of the kingdom, or no, greatness in the kingdom or greatness in light of the gospel. Both of these work. Something along the lines of because Aggie Trout 621856 now following on Mixer. Good to see you, Aggie Trout. Thanks for following. Appreciate that. So we're going to be looking at something because of the, let's see, because the kingdom of God is unlike worldly kingdoms. We must recognize, no, maybe not recognize is right. We must strive to be servants of all. Anyone who wants to be first must be very last, the servant of all, because the kingdom of God is unlike worldly kingdoms. Because God's kingdom functions backwards. No. Because greatness is measured differently in God's economy, we should each strive to be the servant of all. I think that's closer. This is too wordy though. This is like fat and wordy. And then verses 30 to 32 is just essentially emphasize the fact that God's economy is different. So either of these starting things might be okay. This might work here. Greatness is measured differently in God's economy. I can prove this. So this will be something like greatness measured differently verses 30 to 32. And then striving to be a servant verses 33 to 35. And then it's something like practical examples of servitude. And that's 36 to 37. We're starting to get there. We should strive to be the servant of all. Now, if we do an application consistent with keyword changes, we should strive to be the servant of each other. We should strive to be the servant of children. We should strive to be the servant of Christ. So let's go with this. We should each strive to be the servants of each other. We should each strive to be the servants of children. We should each strive to be the servants of Christ. So this could go. So this would be verse 34 to 35. This would be verse 36 to 37. And this would be verse 37. So this works. You can also do an application consistent one. So you could do, we should each strive to be the servants of all. Because greatness is greatness is different in God's gospel. Verse 30 to 31. So this could be verses 33 and 34. something like this. Oh man. Sometimes propositions are hard. Sometimes they're hard. So this will be application heavy because I'll be hitting the application from different perspectives. This one will be information heavy. What did I do last week? That wasn't last week. This one was last week. Consequences of unbelief. Sometimes I wonder if I make sermon writing harder than it is. So last time, I kept the application the same and I changed the information. Boom, boom, boom. This time I can maybe do the opposite. Keep the information the same and change the application. And I think that'll drive better. So I'm leaning towards this one. The problem is with this one, you have to essentially exegete verses 30 to 33 in the introduction. Let's see what Chapel has to say. And I'm looking for propositions, I think. Sermons are built on propositions, classic homiletics, blah, blah, blah. Every proposition should be stated broadly enough so that the main points are divisions of, not additions to what's thought. So that works for both of these. Universal truth Greatness is measured differently in God's economy. Application based upon the universal truth. We should strive to be servants of all. Why? So what? Formal main points are also universal truths in hortatory modes. Like propositions, main points may be informally reduced, abbreviated, and implied. However, preachers benefit from mastering the following foundations. Each main point is a division of the thought presented in a proposition. Because main points are so closely related to the proposition, helpful if they reflect the proposition structure, which parallel one another and the proposition, so I have each of those. Because Jesus commands believers to proclaim boldly, we must proclaim Christ at every opportunity. Because Jesus commands believers to proclaim boldly, we should proclaim Christ in difficult situations. We should proclaim Christ to difficult people. So this is I'm doing a principle consistent. My principle stays the same each time. See, this lines up well because every opportunity, all. The clauses of the main points that do not remain consistent are the magna clauses. So I could talk about serving each other, serving even children, and then finally serving Christ. Should it be economy or kingdom? I think kingdom is better. Thus, subpoints support or develop magna clause because they contain. The universal truth found in the anchor clause should be developed either just before or just after the proposition. and or early in the first main point if necessary. See, that's the key that I've been missing. Since this premise is the foundation of the message, usually this means the anchor clause reflects a concept that requires little proof and is relatively obvious in the text. The main point clause that is repeated is called the anchor clause. Experienced preachers also try to avoid the use of passive verbs and negative wording in main points. This is the key. So if I go with this one, I like the structure of this one more. I love the idea that I'm just going to get so much application in here. But this is not necessarily self-evident from the text. But it shouldn't be that hard to prove this. And if it's not hard to prove, then I can do it right at the end of the introduction. How easy would it be to prove that greatness is measured differently in God's kingdom?
Try to forget that you were here. Some part of me wants to disappear with you. My soul went all that I could afford. So only gonna fall into what you explore.
See, I could go with this one. We should strive to be servants of all, because it states it explicitly. Anyone who wants to be first must be very last, and the servant of all. We should strive to be servants of all, because greatness is different in God's economy. Greatness is different in God's gospel. Greatness is different among God's people. That could even be a two-pointer, maybe. Oh, this is the problem, guys. There's just so many options when it comes to preaching. And that's fantastic because it just gives us such opportunity. But, man. Makes it tough to decide and go with something. I like this one because this is more obvious from the text. Jesus says it. Jesus just says it, so I can just be like, look, he tells us to be the servants of all. Why? Well, the gospel's different than you would expect. God's people are different than you'd expect. God's Savior is different than you'd expect. But I don't like this, and this. Because I don't like that it's... I guess I'm just tending towards... I like a principle consistent outline and not an application consistent outline. You know, let me think about... See, the problem is it's deductive. Let me, let me think about an inductive way of developing this. I forgot the name of the book that talked about it. Let me save it up here. There's something like sermons that have to be heard or something like that. Preaching to be heard, sermons that command attention. So these are all deductive here. So if I was to go purely inductive with each of these, let's think. So this would be something like, what does it mean to be a servant of all? That could work. Take a simple thesis statement for an oral. Fishing is challenging because it requires patience. Why is fishing challenging? Speaker would set up the subject as the overarching question. An inductive sermon would have the subject as the overarching question right at the outset, but the answer would be withheld. How can we enjoy life when it seems so random and purposeless? So this is an inductive structure for Ecclesiastes 3, 1-15. So we might, what does it mean to be the servant of all? How can we practically be the servant of all? That might work. I think this might work inductively. Readers know the primary How is God's economy so different from our own? Setting up the overarching question within the deductive structure. How so, or can you prove that? Thesis easily prompts the question. So I'm getting a sense that you should really only go deductive if you're being almost purposely provocative or setting up things in such a way that people might disagree. I can buy that. And the problem is, do any of these seem to be particularly provocative? We should strive to be servants of all. No, that's standard Christian stuff. Greatness is measured differently in God's kingdom. I think people would recognize that. Servants of each other, children in Christ. No, see, none of these are like, ooh, why is that true? And so because of that, I feel like we can't go deductive. So I think we need to go with this, and I think it needs to be inductive. I think this is what we need to go to. What does it mean to be a servant of all? How can I be a servant of all? The Bible tells. Yeah, this is good. That maintains tension. Now, can any of this be built into these? I think I could, but I feel like it'd be a stretch. I think it's much easier to go here. The deductive structure is an effective option when the thesis statement is one that easily generates tension by itself. See, this does not generate tension. Neither of these do. Because greatness is different. Yeah, neither of these do. We know these are true. They're too familiar, so I gotta go inductive, I think. Hello? Hey,
This fire in my head got me on edge. I'm going out tonight. Faded on a thread. Don't know what's next. I wanna feel alive. I kissed a stranger in a white dress. She put a crown on top of my head. Said every king needs a queen in his bed. I said, hey girl, I'd like to stay here for a while, just you and I. Far from the places we can't get away from. She said, hey boy, I like your style. I'll let you play me for a while. Play me till the sun rises. Play me like a violin. Here with you now, not coming down. Leave my insanity up here in the clouds. Look what we found, oxygen we can breathe. Let the madness slowly undress. Rip the mask off over our heads. We can dive down deeper instead. I said, hey girl, I'd like to stay here for a while, just you and I. Far from the places we can't get away from. She said, hey boy, I like your style. I'll let you play me for a while. Play me till the sun rises. Play me like a violin. Play me till the sun rises. Play me till your hands give in. Play me like a violin. Play me till the sun rises. Play me till you can't hide it. Play me like a violin. Play me till the sun rises. Play me till your hands give in. Play me like a violin. Play me till the sun rises. Play me till you can't hide it. Play me like a violin.
So I think I've got it, guys. We're going this way. I just like how this is developing better. I think this will turn to some compelling main points. And I like maybe if one of these. I think we'll go inductive. There's not enough tension inherent in the proposition itself, so we got to go inductive, and it's going to be something like this, and then we'll develop it with these main points. And then we can introduce this, I think, in the intro or just after the proposition, and that wouldn't be a problem at all. I think I'm ready. I'm ready to put together the canvas already. Man, it's early in the week to begin to this. It's so nice to begin to this early. What is it? 30 to 39? Or was it 37? Can't remember. 37. Just call it something like servant of all. Servants of all. What does it mean to be a servant of all? I think that holds enough tension to interest people. So I think this will carry the tension that I need, and it'll set me up for the 3 main points. So my first one will be servants of each other. And then I can point out the disciples arguing which one of them is the greatest. And Jesus telling them, if you want to be first, you're going to be last. The last will be first. And then not only servants of each other, but servants of children. And I can point to those verses where he has the children stand amongst the midst of them. And then finally, servants of God / Christ. I don't know which one yet. Probably God. And I think that'll cover the main bases. So, servants of all. What does it mean to be a servant of all? What does it mean to be a servant of all? Well, first it means to be servants of each other. Look with me at verses Look with me at verses 33 and through 35. What were you arguing about on the road? But they kept quiet. They had been arguing about who was the greatest. Sitting down, Jesus said to the 12, "Anyone who wants to be first must be very last and the servant of all." So boom, we're servants of each other, and I can talk all about that. And then, but not only must we be servants of each other, we also must be servants of children. He took a little child who was placed among them. Taking the child in his arms, he said to them, "Whoever welcomes one of the least little children welcomes me. Whoever welcomes me does not welcome me, but the one who sent me." Look, he even says welcoming little children. And so we can talk about the down and out and those who are not necessarily considered high in society. And then finally, ultimately, we're servants of God. And I'll probably just go God, because verse 37, "Whoever welcomes one of these little children in my name welcomes me. Whoever welcomes me does not welcome me, but the one who sent me, God himself." So I'm going to go with God for now. And of course, Christ is part of that, but... And this is... And then I'll just put at the top inductive. Because my secretarial will know to only put this main question and not these 3 points, because it's inductive. Because I think deductive would lose the tension that I need. So what did I go with? What does it mean to be a servant of all? What does it mean to be a servant of all? I think that's good. I think that'll maintain the tension I need. 34 to 35, 36 to 37, and 37. Oops. And then in the intro, I'm going to have to introduce the idea of the first half of the verse, i.e. greatness is measured differently in God's kingdom. You see, greatness is measured differently in God's kingdom. And in light of the fact that greatness is measured differently in God's kingdom, Jesus makes it very clear we must be a servant of all. What does it mean? What does it actually mean to be a servant of all? I think the text tells us if we dig deeper, something like that. I think this gets me started. Tells me where I need to go with the intro. I still have some ideas I need to fully flesh out, but I'm really mostly there. Yeah, I like how this is developing. Okay. I mean, this is already ready to go to the bulletin. I'm gonna stop here for the night, guys. It's about ready for me to hit the hay anyway. But I've got my starting question. I've got the fact that it's inductive. I got my 3 main points. Now all it's gonna take is for me to develop these, and they're gonna develop very nicely because they're all applications, strong applications in different ways. So I really like how this is coming together. Anyway, hope you guys have a good night. And it was nice to stream from my office again. I haven't done this in a while. But hope you guys have a good night. Have a good week overall. And I hope to catch up with you guys later. Take care. God bless. Bye now.